Welcome to How to Design Your Wedding Invitations in Canva. My name's Tanya and I'm the owner of the Event Wanderer Co. We are a wedding stationery and signage company based in Melbourne, Australia, and I am so thrilled to be able to bring you this online tutorial series on how to create your own gorgeous on-trend stationery in Canva. We've been in the business for 2 years now. However, I have over 15 years experience working in the event industry, so I understand the stress that wedding planning and event planning in general can bring. However, I also adore using a program like Canva, so I believe that in amongst all the stress, we can still have heaps of fun with an online design program. And what's more, you can craft gorgeous stationery yourself so that on the day that you get married, your guests can sit there and say, "Who did this?" You can turn around with pride and say that you made everything yourself. Using a program like Canva is so simple, and I am going to give you my tips and tricks on how to do this. Let's get started. So before we get into the designing process in Canva, the one thing I want to bring you is Pinterest. I adore Pinterest as a starting point whenever I am creating new designs for clients or just for our online shop. I also encourage my clients to send me through URL links to their own Pinterest boards because this helps me to understand what they're thinking of when it comes to their stationery. Pinterest is a wealth of knowledge, almost like an encyclopedia, where you can see different things like font alignments, font pairings, so handwritten scripts paired with beautiful serif font or sans serif fonts. You can see alignments, you can see color combinations, what's on trend. It is just a really perfect place to start to see what pretty much embodies you. So whether that's you as a couple or as individuals, whether or not it be themes that you want to bring to your event, Pinterest is the perfect place to start. And I wouldn't start designing until I've had a really solid look at what's out there and also what some very talented graphic designers around the world are doing with wedding stationery in 2023. Okay, on to the fun part, the designing. So the first thing I'm going to do is set up my artboards, and for this invitation I'm going to set it at a standard size of 120 millimeters by 180 millimeters. I'll put all these sizings down in the show notes as well so you have them, but that size is a fairly standard invitation size for the wedding industry in 2023. This also means that you'll be able to use an envelope size of 130 millimeters by 190 millimeters, and that's more than enough to also give you space to include your RSVPs and your details cards and even a belly band if you're using that to hold all those elements together. From there, I will add in my rulers and my guides. I like to have these to help with final placement and alignments within Canva. It just means that everything is going to be centered beautifully from a printing point of view. From there, I like to start by just putting in my couples' names and then using that as a bit of a guide to then format the rest of the invitation. For this design, I am going to use a handwritten script font that I quite enjoy. So you'll see that I have created that. Now I'm going to duplicate those and basically separate those names into two separate text boxes. This will mean that I can then start moving the names around across the artboard as I need to. I'm also going to duplicate that again and add in a plus sign. I'm not a big fan of the ampersand in this font, but they're the three key elements that I want to pretty much play with from the first point of view, because they will then kind of form the rest of the design that we're going to build that design around. So there we have it. We've got Georgia and Nicholas, and it's all centered to begin with. Now that's not to say that we won't move that later on, but it's just a really good starting point. From there, I'm going to add in the key and crucial event details. So for that, I'm going to use a sans serif font called Brandon Grotesque. I love this font because it is just really simple, really classic. I do like to separate out my letters a little bit, so I will put in a letter spacing in there as well. And I'm going to keep that at a size 8 font for the moment. But something to bear in mind, obviously, when you're doing things on a screen, they look much larger than what they're actually going to be as an end result. So something to keep in mind is that when an item like this is going to be printed, we don't want to be using too fine of fonts. Things like light format fonts, even italics to a degree, can get a little bit lost in a print unless you're really working with white and black. If you're working with white, white ink, that is, it might get a little bit lost. So it's just something to bear in mind that obviously you want your guests to be able to see. So there you go. I've added in my date. I've gone a little bit non-traditional with the date and spelt it out as opposed to going with a more numerical format. Now going to add in our event details, our location details, which we are just going to put in there for the moment. I am doing everything in the same font height to begin with, because once we get all of that information, we will start playing around with it. The other thing we also want to look at is line spacing. We don't want our information too close together because it will start to look a little bit messy. So for the moment, we'll put that in as a 1.6 alignment. So there you have it. We're just getting all of our details in there. We'll then add in a bit about the dress code. You can also put in information about your RSVP date, whether or not you want to send people to a wedding website, whether they can RSVP. I also like to put in some information, which is what I've done here, to say reception to follow. There's so much fun that can be had with a design like this, and the wording at the end of the day, you don't have to follow any prescribed format for wording with a wedding invitation. You can make it uniquely yours, and I love putting quotes on things for couples. I've got one couple at the moment who are huge Pokemon fans, and we've incorporated their quotations into their invitations because they love that type of thing and it is uniquely them. So keep that in mind, that at the end of the day, you want this design to be all about you and to reflect you as a couple. So don't be afraid to add in quirky little things that really make you shine. So the other thing I'll do here, I wasn't overly happy with the alignment of that design. Sometimes with handwritten fonts, they can look a little bit funny when they're straight. So we've put that on a ever so slight angle of 10 degrees, which is generally the angle I will work with most fonts. So to add a little bit different, we are then going to make that reception to follow element into a script, just to bring in another component and to draw attention to the eye down there. Don't be afraid to play around with your font sizes either. It's always nice to put a bit of hierarchy into your designs. So whether or not it be in making, your date stand out a little bit more than what your event details do, your event location details, that is, you can easily do that. But we've just gone with something simple there, reception to follow. It's a nice little break, just to kind of keep the flow of the font coming in through there. And yeah. All right, so we've got all of our elements starting to come together. We're also just going to put in this element here about our attire. So following on the, quite elegant nature of this, we're going to make it a black tie affair, and we're going to say with this one RSVP via the enclosed card. Now, as you can see, that top element I'm not overly happy with because it is obviously a bit bigger, but we will play around with that in a second. So do not be afraid to just play. You'll see from the guides there, the 6.6, it will tell you that the spacing between each section is even, and that is why I do love working with Canva, because that's an automatic adjustment that it will tell you. So as opposed to working with a program like Adobe Illustrator, which we will use for our more custom clients, with something like this, it is really handy that those automatic guides are there. Last thing I'm going to add to this design is the names of the guests. Now, I will cover how to do all of their personalization in another video, but just to give you a heads up, if you are planning to go down the route of personalizing each of your invitations, make certain that you're happy with the final design before you start to change the names, because once you've got 50 plus invitations and you're not happy with something, it is a real pain to change them all. But that's another video for a future time. So last thing I'm going to do here, just to make things a little bit different and to break it up a little bit, is stick a little line in there as well. So you don't have to do that. You can do vertical text, you can do horizontal text, you can pretty much do whatever you want. However, this is just a really quick little design that we're whipping up today just to show you how easy it is to design something from scratch based on what you've seen on Pinterest or what you've seen online at all. All right, so the last thing I am going to do is pretty much center the whole document. So you will see that I have grabbed everything there. Everything's in lovely bright purple and it is aligning in the center. So that's what we want to do. We want to ensure that it's all perfectly aligned and centered, because then we can have a bit of fun and start playing with some shapes. All right, so onto shapes. Obviously, it is a huge thing at the moment to have a shape for your invitation. So no longer are we thinking about the plain old rectangle, although it does have its place. So working with shapes is going to be a specialty printing service though that you will need, because some of the big online printers don't necessarily do die cut shapes. So you are probably looking for a more trade-based printer, specialist printer, and that is something that we can help with at the Event Wanderer Co. And again, I'll put the details in the show notes. So for this one, let's play with what we call a quarter arch. So in Canva, I've already got my shape templates set up just so that I can play with them all. And I will give you access to this free resource in the show notes below. The thick red line around the outside of my templates is actually my safe zone. So that's a 1 centimeter margin within the design that I know is going to be the safe element for the text. So everything within that border is going to be pretty much print friendly and not get lost by the printers or run into any errors of being too close to the edges. So with something like this design, you're probably going to be looking at more left aligned because of the nature of that arch. So I'm just going to start moving everything over to the left and left aligning it, which again is very on trend. You can potentially do names on the left, information on the right. Honestly, with this, there is no right or wrong, as I've said before. It is very much personal to what you want. So don't be afraid to play. It is a very easy rabbit hole, as I like to use the term, to go down the Canva rabbit hole that is. And if you're familiar with your program, you will completely understand why I've said that. It is a lot of fun. But again, don't stress about that too much. So we can play around with potentially putting dates in vertical text. We can put them in different font weights. Essentially, at the end of the day, the world is your oyster when it comes to the shapes. So some very on-trend shapes at the moment are scallops, waves, and then also custom shapes as well. And again, that is where your specialty trade printers are going to come in, because they are going to be able to create those shapes for you. There are a heap of shapes available as well within Canva, so don't be afraid to play with the shapes in Canva as well. Just make certain that when you are going through to the print side of things, that you have made them a color that is different to your design. So in the case here, we have that in red. So when I would brief this design into my printer for printing, I would basically give them the indication that the print line, the die cut line is the red line around the outside of the design. Just be mindful, don't put it in a color that is going to be, say, complementary to your design. A design function and a design element at the moment that is very on trend is the concept of a border. And generally that will be a similar but slightly darker color of the cardstock that you're using. So for instance, a pale pink background with a hot pink border. And yes, it looks phenomenal, looks amazing. I've done it for clients. Just be mindful that your printer doesn't mistake that design element for a die cut line or potentially print it. So just ensuring that when you are communicating with your printers, you are communicating your vision clearly, because that will help them to understand what you're actually trying to achieve. So we've had a bit of a play here. What we're now going to do is just move those names up and reduce the size, because obviously we've lost a bit of the height of the shape there and a bit of the corner of the shape. And now we are going to see how our guest names look on a curve. So just go up to the effects section of Canva, click on curve, and we are just going to reduce the arch, the depth of the arch. So we're at 27 at the moment. We're probably actually going to need to take that out a little bit further to match that curvature into the curvature of our quarter arch that we've got going there. So it might look a bit funny to begin with, but it will start to come together further down the line. So there we go. So we're just going to kind of move that down a little bit more. It's still a little bit out, so we're just going to rotate that ever so slightly. Truth be told, sometimes the curvatures with a quarter arch can be a little bit hard to get right. So it is just a little bit of trial and error and working out what looks best from your line of sight, your judgment point of view. There we go. So that's how we've changed the design from a rectangular design down into a shape. And we've moved those elements around. We've made them smaller. We've still made them legible, which is the most important point. But we've obviously included it in there. We've added it in at a left alignment. We're still using those spacing guides to create the exact spaces behind those elements, which you'll see us do there. No idea what I'm doing here. Anyway, that's okay. Nope, so yeah. Okay, so I'm not entirely happy with the placement of that date. So I'm just going to add the date back in to the top section, and we might just do the date a little bit differently to what we've done previously, just ensuring we also put the time in there. And then I am going to get rid of the vertical date because it's just not really looking the way that I want it to look. Again, using those automatic rulers, and let's get rid of that date. So there we have it. And that's a really good starting point. We'll bring that down slightly, and there you have it. What I would probably do differently here as well is we could increase the width of the intro page just to extend it across the design a little bit more. We can make it a little bit bigger. We can make it bolder. There are so many things that we can potentially do. So going back to our original design and how to download it. So we're literally going to click on the share button, download. We're going to select PDF print. We're going to ensure that our crop marks and bleed are selected, and then we're going to change our color profile over to CMYK, which is best for professional printing. Once you've downloaded it, it'll come off as a PDF, which is what we want. And then you'll be able to upload this into either your online printing format, or you can send it through to your professional printers and they'll be able to take it from there. Hopefully you've enjoyed this video on how to design on-trend stationery in Canva. Hopefully we've showed you how simple and time effective it can be. Please follow us along for future videos because I will be coming back in the future to show you how to take this design and transform it not only into your RSVP, but also your details cards, menus, and so much more. Subscribe below and hopefully we'll see you again soon.